The world's teetering on the brink. Nuclear war feels inevitable. And then this beacon of hope appears. A promise of safety, survival, even a better future underground. But what if that promise, that glossy veneer, was actually hiding something way worse? Something more sinister than the apocalypse itself? Today, for you, our curious listener, we're diving deep, really deep, into the dark, twisted legacy of Vault-Tec. The pre-war corporation that billed itself as America's top defense contractor. We've gone through articles, research, internal notes, all about their infamous vaults. Our mission, to pull out the most chilling bits of info, expose the real horrific purpose behind these supposed sanctuaries, and really grapple with the destructive impact of, well, unchecked scientific ambition running wild. Before the bombs dropped, Vault-Tec's marketing was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. Cheerful thumbs up plastered on bright ads, promising these high-tech bunkers as the ultimate survival solution. Slogans like, better living underground, or prepare for the future today. They weren't just catchy. They genuinely gave people hope. Vault-Tec looked benevolent,
But what really comes out from these records, it's profoundly disturbing. Beneath that shiny promise of salvation, a deeply unethical, cold agenda, Vault-Tec's actual purpose, and this was pushed by figures like the infamous Dr. Stanislaus Braun. It wasn't just about preservation, it was this massive nationwide thing on the societal preservation program. And listen, this wasn't about saving humanity as we know it, or even just picking a few lucky ones. No, it was about widespread, often horrific social and psychological experiments on a scale you can barely imagine. The goal, and some recovered documents state this explicitly, was to meticulously study human reactions under extreme stress, isolation, tightly controlled variables. These vaults, they weren't just bunkers, they were labs, elaborately designed, each one a unique custom experiment. And they had little, maybe even zero regard for the well-being, the dignity, or just the basic humanity of the people inside. It was a huge, unethical sociological project, carefully planned, chillingly disguised as the ultimate survival plan. Selling hope, but delivering, well, a living hell. All for science, or a really twisted version of it.
And just when you think that's disturbing enough, the rabbit hole goes deeper. When you grasp the scale of this deception, the sheer planning involved, it gets fascinating in a truly horrifying way. Let's pull back those blast doors on some of the most notorious vaults. See the real extent of Vault-Tec's depravity. We'll start with a place that was supposed to protect the most innocent, the children. Okay, try to imagine this. Pre-war America. Parents are frantic, desperate to shield their kids from nuclear war. And Vault 75 seems like the answer. It's built directly under Malden Middle School. On the surface, it looked like a safe haven just for children. They even offered subsidized spots to get lots of kids in. It must have felt like a beacon promising to protect the next generation, ensure society continues, securing the future, literally, by housing the kids.
But when we dig into the layers here, what we find is far from a sanctuary. It's a profoundly sinister eugenics program. Conceived and run by Dr. Braun and his team, Vault 75's real objective, the refinement of human genetics, using truly horrifying methods, selective breeding, genetic modification, hormonal treatments. The chilling goal wasn't just saving kids, it was creating new generations of human embryos, test subjects, cultivating what they saw as a perfect human strain. This wasn't protection. It was mass production of human material for experiments. And the deceit started the second families walked in. Children were immediately, cruelly separated from their parents right at the entrance. They were taken to a central atrium, told it was orientation. Meanwhile, the adults, processed by security, supposedly for their orientation. The chilling truth, and we see this in terminal entries and records, is that the adults were systematically eliminated. Parents were killed, leaving the kids totally isolated under Vault-Tec's absolute control, setting the stage for the real experiment.
My God. So they weren't just taking kids for safety, they were kidnapping them. And then what? These kids were raised inside the vault.
Exactly. Raised inside and fed this twisted version of history. They were taught about the horrors of Uptopia. That was their cynical nickname for the wasteland outside. It was meant to instill this fervent desire in them to venture out strong, smart, perfect after their graduation. This psychological conditioning was constant, shaping their worldview, prepping them for their role in Vault-Tec's grand plan. They lived their whole lives under this illusion, believing they were the chosen few. But the real horror, the ultimate betrayal, that came when they turned 18. Graduation day, individuals who were deemed insufficient by the Vault's arbitrary genetic standards the kids themselves never understood. They faced a horrifying end. After this cruel, mock-celebrating ceremony, they were incinerated. Terminal entries just starkly mention disposing of failed students' remains, and there are even chilling hints of organ harvesting for those deemed genetically exceptional. Cryptic stuff about resource optimization and biometric repurposing. The fact that you can't easily find an incinerator in the main parts of the vault, it suggests a hidden, nastier section. Or maybe the remains were processed differently, which supports the organ harvesting idea. And this vault was meant to last for generations. That really underlines the long-term, cold-blooded nature of this grotesque project.
I'm just trying to process the sheer level of calculated cruelty here. This is child exploitation on an unimaginable scale. Forced eugenics on the most vulnerable. The ultimate betrayal of trust. Giving false hope to parents, to kids, only to lead to this brutal culling based on arbitrary pseudoscientific standards. It shows a complete, utter disregard for human dignity, for individual life, all in the name of some twisted definition of science and perfection. It's no wonder, really, that eventually a rebellion broke out. Junior test subjects, helped by graduate scientists who'd seen too much. It was suppressed, of course, but it shows the human spirit, even under that kind of pressure, before, the vault just became a gunner stronghold, leaving the fate of the original inhabitants. Well, a chilling mystery. Okay, from the just unspeakable cruelty towards children in Vault 75, our journey through Vault-Tec's nightmares takes us to the capital wasteland, Vault 108, near Canterbury Commons. And this place, it didn't just fall into madness. It was engineered for failure. Right from the start, all the standard jobs in the vault, medical, maintenance, everything deliberately left unfilled. The overseer was supposed to assign them, acting as an experiment catalyst. And this intentional gap, it was designed to create instability immediately, test the limits of leadership, social bonds, under extreme manufactured pressure.
Which brings us to a key part of the experiment. Why build a vault, a supposed safe haven, with a deliberately sabotaged power supply, the main power, set to fail in just 20 years, a tiny fraction of its intended 100-year lifespan? And the backup, a steam whistle mini geothermal unit. Vault-Tec scientists knew from day one it was totally insufficient to power the whole place. It was literally a ticking time bomb. Even choosing the overseer, Brody Jones, was part of this plan. Pre-assignment medical tests showed he had a genetic predisposition for a rare cancer, estimated to kill him just over 3 years after the project started. Recovered logs stated clearly, these two events should combine to allow a proper catalyst that allows this project to continue as planned. So not only was the infrastructure doomed, the leadership was designed to fail, ensuring a rapid slide into chaos. Key staff like Zachary K. Jameson, Jarek Maddox, Nathan Origin, they were basically put in this engineered death trap to watch it all fall apart.
Wow, so they weren't just setting the stage for chaos, they were orchestrating it, down to the overseer's health. But beyond the engineered collapse, what was the core experiment here? What were they actually trying to do?
The real heart of Vault 108's experiment was cloning, specifically cloning one man, Gary. Scientists inside the vault ran repetitive cloning experiments, focusing just on Gary. Holotapes found there described this chilling progression. Every time they cloned Gary, he became hostile to non-clones, and each successive clone got more violent. This wasn't some accident. It was observed, documented, and chillingly, maybe even intended. It was a progression they tracked. You can imagine the staff maybe initially trying to understand or contain it, just getting completely overwhelmed. After the 53rd Clone 53, the staff were really struggling. Terminal entries show their desperation. They even suggest resorting to destroying some clones for more tests in the observation rooms. The cloning lab itself, the examination tables, containment cells, safes with genetic material. It just paints this picture of relentless, inhumane experimentation. The Garys weren't people. They were data points, reproducible vectors of aggression.
Struggled. I can only imagine the sheer psychological weight of that. 53 versions of the same aggressive guy, each one worse than the last. That's a living nightmare they built.
It absolutely was. And the vault eventually just evolved into this chaotic, decaying labyrinth. The descriptions say it was in an advanced state of disrepair, water leaks, rust, collapsed sections. It became a physical mirror for the mental and social breakdown inside. It ended up populated only by these identical, murderous Gary clones, some armed with knives, lead pipes, others just using their bare, mutated hands. Each Gary wasn't just one threat, but this terrifying, self-replicating echo of engineered violence. And the fact there's no working central terminal, it really reinforces the idea of an experiment just abandoned to its own horrific momentum, leaving only the violent legacy of Gary. Even mole rats started colonizing the entrance, like nature reclaiming this failed human project.
It's a nightmare of unchecked genetic experimentation. The complete loss of identity becomes not just a tragedy, but a weapon. Engineered violence. Imagine the psychological terror, facing countless hostile versions of yourself, each more aggressive. Or just losing yourself in that violent, repetitive echo inside a decaying, locked space. It's a profound statement on what happens when science throws ethics out the window, creating a self-replicating horror that consumed everything. Right, so if engineered genetic madness wasn't enough, wait till you hear how Vault-Tec turned something as universal, as beautiful as sound into a weapon. Let's shift focus to Vault 92, northwest of Old Olney, in the capital wasteland. This vault was specifically designed for the world's best musicians, supposed to hold 245 occupants. Ostensibly, it was built to preserve musical talent during the Great War. And on the surface, it sounded like an artist's paradise. State-of-the-art sound equipment, countless instruments, even a priceless Soli Stradivarius violin. A haven for creativity, right? A sanctuary for sonic beauty.
But what's really going on beneath that artistic surface is profoundly sinister. The experiment was called the White Noise Mind Suggestion Combat Experiment, WNMSCE for short. The explicit goal, laid out in the documents we have, was to implant subliminal combat messages into the minds of the residents. Using carefully modulated, low-frequency white noise, this wasn't just background sound, it was a deliberate, insidious attempt to manipulate and control thoughts, emotions, ultimately actions, turning artists into unwitting subjects of psychological warfare. Overseer Richard Rubin and Professor Malleus were the key figures running this chilling project.
So these musicians, people who dedicated their lives to harmony, to expression, they were unknowingly bombarded with subliminal commands. What were the first signs that this horrific experiment was working?
Initially, yeah, the project seemed to have what Vault-Tec probably considered a disturbing kind of success. Professor Malleus, in his early logs, even congratulated his team. He noted that a significant portion, 33%, of subjects lapsed into this trance-like state, exhibited subtle, involuntary tics. He actually boasted of effectiveness close to 100%, less than 1% error margin. He thought the subliminal suggestions were hitting home. They were observing mental manipulation in real time, but that success was short-lived, and it came with catastrophic and, frankly, predictable consequences. Problems showed up fast and brutally. 3 dwellers, totally unprovoked, just flew into a bloody rage. Mass murder inside the vault. The experiment, far from being controlled, just spiraled rapidly. Uncontrolled violence induced insanity, spreading like a disease among the population. The sounds of music were replaced by screams, crashing instruments, the sickening thud of violence.
Hold on, Professor. You're saying they saw a success rate with mental manipulation, but then it just immediately devolved into mass murder. What was the connection? Was it a flaw in the experiment, or did they just push it too far?
It was really both. The success was the flaw. Their goal was combat suggestion, right? And the subjects, under the white noise influence, did become violent. But it was indiscriminate, uncontrollable. Professor Malleus himself, despite his initial excitement, was horrified by the results. He pleaded with Overseer Rubin to stop the project. He chillingly noted, sanity is not statistical. He warned the results were too unstable, too devastating, but the project kept going. Driven by the Overseer's desperate need for results, maybe Vault-Tec refusing to admit failure, and continuing, it led to the vault's complete deterioration. In just 1 month, at least 10 dwellers succumbed to the white noise's adverse effects. 7 fatalities resulted. Violence intensified, spread like wildfire, and eventually a staggering 30% of the population was clinically insane, wielding whatever they could find, broken instruments, kitchen knives, pipes fighting a reality that didn't make sense anymore. The vault itself crumbled. Extensive flooding from an underground lake. It became a graveyard for animals, mutated creatures, littered with explosives in the bodies of its once talented residents. The physical decay, stress fractures, crumbling concrete, it mirrored the shattering of minds inside.
The horror here is just profound. Mind control, induced psychosis, weaponizing something as subtle as sound. It's a chilling picture of sanity completely eroding, taking a supposed haven for artists and turning it into a war zone of their own minds. Driven by invisible commands, it's a stark reminder that some kinds of scientific ambition, especially those messing with the human mind, can lead to unspeakable suffering. Self-destruction. Turning a vibrant community into a collection of lunatics. The irony of using music and sound equipment for something so destructive, it's deeply unsettling, turning a symphony into a scream. Okay, our journey through Vault-Tec's depravity continues. And this next vault, it's less about biological or genetic horror, more about the horror of the human soul itself. Let's dive into Vault 11, a place designed not for physical torment, but for deep psychological and moral manipulation. This vault held a community subjected to one of Vault-Tec's most insidious experiments, a twisted social engineering project built around an annual ritual, sacrifice.
Yeah, this particular vault gives us a chilling look at human nature under extreme pressure, framed as a morality play. The core experiment was simple, but profoundly cruel. The residents were told that one dweller had to be chosen each year and sacrificed to some unseen overseer. The ultimatum was stark: refuse, and everyone in the vault dies. Imagine that. An immediate, horrifying dilemma for a contained population of about 1,000 people.
So every single year, a life had to be picked, had to be extinguished, or everyone dies. How did a community, supposedly built for survival, deal with such a barbaric condition?
Well, initially, there must have been shock, horror, resistance, absolutely, but fear. Fear is a powerful motivator. Over time, that annual ritual became this ingrained, terrifying part of their lives. Recovered terminal entries paint a picture of how quickly moral principles just eroded under that pressure. Residents broke down into bitter political factions. Groups like the Justice Bloc and the Common Good popped up. But these factions, they were less about real ideals, more about grabbing power to avoid being chosen for sacrifice. The voting process became a tool for corruption, backstabbing, even murder. Leaders would sacrifice rivals, dissenters were silenced, all to put off their own death, or the death of someone in their group. It's a horrifying real-world parallel to things like the Milgram experiment, where authority and perceived consequences drive people to do things they'd normally find abhorrent. The vault records show escalating paranoia, voting records where a single vote decided someone's fate. There are accounts of residents actively campaigning against each other, framing people, exploiting weaknesses, all in a desperate bid to save themselves. The illusion of choice that was the real genius, and the cruelty of the experiment. Vault-Tec wasn't just watching a forced sacrifice. They were watching the process of a society destroying itself from within, driven by self-preservation and fear, forcing citizens to become complicit in murder.
And what happened at the end, when just the final few survivors were left? What was the conclusion to this twisted social experiment?
The experiment reached its most tragic, most ironic conclusion when only 5 survivors were left. By this point, decades had passed. The weight of that annual ritual had just crushed their humanity, exhausted, morally bankrupt. They made a collective choice: no more sacrifices. They decided to face the supposed annihilation together, defiant against Vault-Tec's cruel ultimatum. But then came the final, brutal twist. Instead of mass execution, a message flashed. "You have passed the test. Congratulations." The vault door, sealed for centuries, finally opened, revealing the outside world. The true purpose, Vault-Tec explained, was just to see if the residents would eventually refuse to sacrifice one of their own for the greater good. If they'd done that earlier, the door would have opened then. No one would have needed to die. The whole horrific ordeal was designed just to push them to that moral breaking point.
That's just unspeakable. A truly cruel kind of freedom. What happened to those 5 survivors? Did they finally walk out into the wasteland free?
No. The horror wasn't over. The psychological damage was too deep, irreparable. The relief of victory was instantly swamped by the crushing realization of how many innocent lives they'd sacrificed, how much they'd compromised their own humanity, all for an experiment that offered an easy way out from the very beginning. Overwhelmed by guilt, paranoia, the sheer weight of their past, these 5 survivors, instead of embracing freedom, turned on each other. A final, brutal act of self-destruction. Only one managed to commit suicide, the other 4 just brutally murdered each other. A final, bloody testament to the complete societal and personal collapse Vault-Tec had engineered. It's the profound tragedy of humanity failing its ultimate moral test. Not just once, but over and over, until the very idea of community was destroyed.
This vault just exemplifies psychological manipulation, forced sacrifice, societal breakdown. It's a chilling look at how easily human morality can be corrupted under extreme pressure, and how the pursuit of progress can lead to the most profound, self-destructive cruelty. The illusion of choice, the constant threat, that final, bitter realization. It makes Vault 11 one of Vault-Tec's most deeply disturbing morality plays. Okay, your final stop on this tour of Vault-Tec horrors takes us to Vault 22, in the Mojave Wasteland, known evocatively as the Green Vault. Now, on the surface, this one actually stood out. Seems like genuine scientific altruism. It was presented as an agricultural research facility, a hopeful project to combat global hunger, developing staple crops resistant to insects, drought, disease. It was the only vault in that whole Mojave area, not meant for civilians, but for a dedicated team of scientists doing this crucial work. Sounds almost noble, right? A shining example of pre-war science tackling a real global problem.
But connecting this to the bigger picture, that noble goal quickly twisted into an ecological and biological nightmare on an epic scale. The downfall of Vault 22 came from a donated fungus, an entomopathogenic fungus, Beauveria mordicana. Basically, for you listening, that's a fungus that acts like a parasite on insects, kills them. This specific strain was meant for pest control, developed at the X22 Botanical Garden at Big MT. But inside Vault 22, this fungus mutated. became an organic Pandora's box. It didn't just infest the crops, it quickly infested the human population, turned them into these grotesque spore carriers. The sign near the vault entrance covered in stark graffiti warns you, "Stay out, the plants kill." It's chillingly literal.
So what started as an agricultural solution became a human plague. How did this biological catastrophe unfold inside that closed ecosystem?
Dr. Harrison Peters' research, documented in the terminals we found, details the horrifying progression. Initial symptoms in people: pneumonia, chills, fever, as the fungus invaded the respiratory system. The infection was relentless, spread gradually, insidiously through the vault. Often people didn't know until it's too late. These early symptoms probably just seemed like a cold or flu, which let the fungus really take hold. Eventually, the fungus completely took over the host's motor functions, effectively controlling their movements. These grotesque spore carriers weren't really human anymore. They were living vectors compelled to move around, spray new spores, unwitting propagators of the infection. The vault suffered a total ecological and social collapse. Those pristine agricultural labs became breeding grounds for this horrifying new life form. Human bodies grotesquely consumed, repurposed by the fungus.
And attempts to stop it. Surely the scientists tried to fight back against this living nightmare they'd unleashed.
They tried, but it was futile. Attempts to eradicate the infection by igniting gas in the lower levels were a real desperate move. It only triggered an aggressive reaction from the spore carriers. Instead of being destroyed, the carriers, now driven by this fungal intelligence, attacked the scientists with terrifying ferocity, decimated the remaining researchers, stopping any plan from working. By 2096, the vault was fully abandoned, just a monument to a biological experiment gone horribly, horribly wrong. The outside environment, too, covered in overgrowth, dense thickets. It eerily reflects the horror inside. The fungus spreading its tendrils out into the landscape, and even the few survivors who managed to escape this green hell, they faced another layer of tragedy. They tried to reach Zion for safety, but they were mercilessly hunted down by a former soldier, a survivalist named Randall Clark. He tragically mistook their persistent coughing caused by the fungal infection for tuberculosis. Fearing they threatened the Mexican survivors he was protecting, he launched this cold, merciless campaign against them. Killed 24 of the 118 fleeing dwellers, ambushed some, hunted others relentlessly. The remaining survivors eventually gave up on Zion, fled the canyon. Some even resorted to eating their own dead for nourishment. A final, grim act of survival in a world consumed by horror.
This vault just exemplifies biological contagion and extreme body horror. On a truly nightmare scale, it's a terrifying scenario where nature, or a grotesquely mutated version of it, reclaims humanity, transforming people into something utterly non-human, alien, terrifying. It's an unsettling testament to scientific ambition leading to an uncontrollable, self-replicating disaster, one that eradicates not just a community, but the very essence of humanity and its victims. The detailed progression, from subtle symptoms to complete motor control, it paints this vivid, horrifying picture of irreversible transformation. It makes you really question what it means to be human. #outro. So we've journeyed through just a few of Vault-Tec's creations, and each one tells this story of profound betrayal, calculated cruelty. From the child exploitation and eugenics in Vault 75, to the cloning madness of Vault 108 and its violent Gary problem, the weaponized sound and induced psychosis of Vault 92, the chilling immorality play of forced sacrifice in Vault 11, and the biological terror of Vault 22, where humans became hosts to a fungal plague. The pattern is undeniable, starkly clear. What we've seen is this blatant disregard for human life and the profound, catastrophic impact of unchecked scientific ambition that just saw people as data.
So what does all this really underscore? What's the takeaway? These aren't just stories from a fictional apocalypse, are they? They raise deeply uncomfortable questions about human nature under extreme pressure, the ethics of societal control, and the inherent dangers of chasing a better future at any cost. Vault-Tec's experiments reveal this dark, chilling side of humanity's drive for control, for scientific advancement, where the ends are twisted to justify the most inhumane means. It's not just the ambition, it's the dehumanization that comes with it. Viewing people as variables, not lives, that's what makes these experiments truly horrifying. It's a perversion of progress itself, a chilling reminder of how even seemingly good intentions can mask truly insidious agendas.
As you reflect on these deep dives, maybe consider this. If you were given the choice, uncertain freedom in a dangerous world, or guaranteed controlled safety where every part of your life is an experiment for some cold clinical purpose, which would you choose? And what price are we as a society really willing to pay for what we see as progress, as ultimate security, especially if that price means sacrificing our fundamental humanity, our dignity, for a statistical outcome. Something to mull over as you navigate your own world, where the pursuit of knowledge often treads that fine line between advancement and the abyss.